the Shamans, those enigmatic beings bred, enslaved, brutally slaughtered, and finally jarred. If they're lucky, they emerge as saints. If not, well, let's just say their fates are less than heavenly. Hello, fellow Tarnished. Today's story is a fascinating theory about who or what Marika is extracting gold from in the memorable trailer scene. When I stumbled upon a message stating, "Have mercy for the spirited away shamans," I started to wonder. We know the shamans were exploited, brutally tortured, and preserved in jars for the Hornsent's weird experiments, supposedly to create saints. But something doesn't quite add up. The Hornsent revered the shamans, and yet they also subjected them to horrific fates. What's really going on here? Stick around because I believe I've unraveled what happened to the shamans and the true origin of Marika's gold. And trust me, as usually, it's a tangled web. But before we move on, if you want to hear me blabbing more about Elden Ring theories, just hit the subscribe button. It's quicker than figuring out what happened to the shamans and way less brutal. And it also helps me out way more than you think. But anyway, let's start with what we know about the shamans. Well, they share kinship with Marika. We know she's a shaman too, and we know that they are a crucial ingredient for jar rituals. The perfect ingredient, actually, although a little tragic. Interestingly though, shamans don't appear to be born the conventional way. They are crafted for a specific purpose. As chillingly noted in a message from Bonnie Village, we are told that your place is in the jar. Night sainthood itself awaits you within. For shamans like you, this is your lot. Life were you accorded for this alone. This reveals a dark truth. The piece "life were you accorded for this alone" means the shamans are manufactured for sacrifice, destined for a life confined within jars, aimed at achieving a twisted form of sainthood. This clearly suggests that their existence is orchestrated solely to be sacrificed, or, as the Hornsent might put it, to be transformed into saints. Yet, essentially, this means they're bred to be tortured and killed. So the shamans were created, but by whom? Well, we know that there is a grandmother, to whom Marika shows a deep connection, signaled through her offering with the golden braid, which reads, "A braid of golden hair, cut loose, Queen Marika's offering to the grandmother." If we're looking solely at the family tree, we've identified the grandmother and the granddaughter, Marika, but the mother is still missing. Let me offer some speculation here. For a bit of context, you should really check out my other video on ancestral spirits to fully understand how they can absorb death and produce life through trees, but TLDR, I've explored how these moose-like creatures absorb death, then sprouts appear on their horns, and these sprouts are then planted that give rise to new life. These creatures act as a sort of literal crucible, if you like, a melting pot where death goes in and new life emerges from the sprouts on their horns, which are subsequently planted and then grow. Now, imagine if the grandmother served a similar role to these ancestral spirits, acting as a vessel for creating life, essentially a crucible. And let's suppose the tree she creates from her sprouts is then producing the shamans, which this would make the tree her offspring, with the grandmother as the mother and the tree subsequently gives birth to Marika. This isn't too far-fetched considering Melina also contemplates what it's like to be born of a mother, implying that in this realm, birth isn't typically associated with mothers. Perhaps Marika, using her own origin story, adapted this method for the entire realm when she rose to power. And if you still think I'm crazy, I think we have another couple of clues that can point in this direction. First off, the grandmother in the Shaman Village is inside a tree. And second, the statue in Bonnie Village, which represents the grandmother, well, it's near a tree, but let's say that's not proof enough. The statue, it has a little branches or sprouts on it. Coincidence? Maybe, but probably not, and I think it works really well with this theory, so I'm saying no, it's not a coincidence. But alright, I know this theory might seem a bit too much out there, and it's just a deduction. We don't have concrete proof of how shamans were actually made. We only know that they were created. But consider this. We're told the shamans were granted life for these alone, for a specific purpose. This doesn't sound like typical life generation, like childbirth. Being granted life suggests they owe gratitude to someone, or it means they are viewed as, well, cattle, owned by someone. In this case, the Hornsent. They are used by them because the Hornsent feel they've allowed the shamans to exist in the first place. It's also akin to the steak on your plate in a way. It didn't choose to be there. Someone owned its mother, allowed the steak to exist, and we consumed it because we feel entitled to that. But forget the steaks for now, and let's unpack this a bit more. The shamans were created, and clearly the Hornsent needed them. Despite treating the shamans almost like livestock, it appears they revered at least one figure deeply, the grandmother. Why am I saying this? Here's how we piece this together. Let's start with the grandmother statue found in Bonny Village, where we acquired the O Mother gesture. If the grandmother was responsible for creating shamans for the Hornsent, it stands to reason that she would have been held in high regards, hence the statue dedicated to her. But there's more to this story. There's a dialogue from the Hornsent guy, whether we befriend him or not, that states, in the case that we decide to assist Leda and he is defeated, he says,
"Oh, mother, wife, and child."
And after defeating Mesmer, if the Hornsent was not summoned during the fight, he says,
"Oh, mother, oh, most cherished wife and child."
O Mother twice in his dialogue. Now, why would he implore the mother with the same words, O Mother, just like the gesture we know is related to the grandmother? This O Mother gesture is the gesture needed to open the way to the Shaman Village, and the gesture used to reply to the message, have mercy for the spirited away shamans. Now, what the bit most cherished wife and child means, I've got no clue. I really can't link these at all. It makes it sound like she has a husband and she wants a child. I mean, this could become its own video to find out where the grandmother came from, but I think we have enough for this one for now. But yes, the Hornsent words and the fact that they needed a production line for the shamans could make it clear that they venerated the grandmother, and that this grandmother was somehow the source of life of the shamans. Then, at some point, a very special shaman joined the show, Marika. Now, why do I say she's special? Well, the Hornsent venerated her too, clearly. We see statues of her everywhere in the Land of Shadow, and they call her a traitor. I mean, yes, sure, she totally burned them all to ashes, but to be called a traitor, she must have been considered an ally or someone highly respected to begin with, right? So, how exactly did that happen? Now, we know the Hornsent used the shamans as livestock, but what made Marika different from the rest? What stopped her from being just another moo in the herd? Here's a not new theory. Maybe Marika was the successful result of one of their jar rituals. Could she have been the first saint? If that's the case, it begs the question, is a saint what you need to create a god? Was this the Hornsent ultimate dream? That they finally succeeded in producing a saint capable of reaching godhood? But then, plot twist, Marika wasn't just another obedient pawn, she had her own agenda. But if the Hornsent view her as a saint, that might have given her free rein to do almost whatever she pleased. And considering her power, it's no wonder things didn't end well for the Hornsent. We'll explore where this leads in just a moment. Let's get back to where this video started. The message that seals the way to the Shaman's Village, have mercy for the spirited away shamans. We have two key pieces of info here. This tells us that the shamans were spirited away, and it also asks for mercy. But who is this plea for mercy directed towards? Are they talking to us? Hardly. We have nothing to do with all of this, and although we are known to kill almost anything that crosses our path, we probably have no quarrel with the shamans just yet. Although we do kill them in the jail, but hey, never mind that for now. Then the plea for mercy could also be intended as don't leave them suffering, like a mercy kill. Okay, we're good at that, we can handle that. The message is in front or near a statue of Marika. Is this message intended for her? This opens up a very interesting plot that we will see in just a minute. But the main point anyway is that they have been spirited away. This suggests that the shamans disappeared without anyone knowing what happened. It's a bit odd. It's like one day the Hornsent woke up and their entire herd was gone. Like a wolf might have taken one or two during the night, but a whole bunch of them? Very suspicious. Also, another key question here is who left this message? Whether they're saying it to us or someone else, more like a prayer seeing where we are. Who was so concerned for the shamans? Could have it been Mesmer? Maybe given that Marika was his mother, he was concerned for his aunties. Could it been the Hornsent? Given how important the shamans were, they were worried when a bunch of them disappeared. Hardly, as they saw them as livestock and clearly someone was producing them, so even if they were worried about them disappearing in bulk, meaning no more jar meat, they wouldn't have cared much for mercy. They would have been more likely to put out bounty than a prayer. What is interesting is that this message makes it sound like a lot, if not all, shaman disappeared in bulk, which makes it clear that it was not the Hornsent doing. Also, on a side note, does the kidnapping maybe include the grandmother too? And so who could have been responsible for this horror? Before we answer that, let's take a moment to explore Belurat Gaol. Right, we've all been talking a lot about the jars here and what's going on, and it's clear to everyone by now. But should we address the elephant in the room? There's a gigantic, oversized jar here, something way bigger than anything else, and it's in a position of, well, kind of like on an altar, prestige, importance. Like, what the hell is going on here? A huge jar is used for one thing only, to contain a lot of stuff, and yes, possibly a lot of shamans. And so, what if Marika was responsible for all the shamans' disappearance? I know it sounds crazy, and I know it sounds like it could have been the Hornsent too, but hear me out, and by the end, you'll see how all the pieces fit together nicely, or horribly, depending what side you're looking at this from. But yeah, what if Marika took all the shamans, the grandmother included, and jarred them all together? Okay, there are a lot of questions to answer here, like how and when, but maybe let's start with the why. To answer that, we need to have a look at this gross thing, the inert meat, which reads, scraps of flesh for filling great jars, rancorous spirits cling to the pinkish red, twitching meat. Blah blah blah, this is what becomes of the condemned who get sliced up and stuffed into jars to become saints instead. And to be clear, what follows isn't my discovery. I picked this up from someone else's video a while ago. Unfortunately, I don't remember who, but if you know, let me know in the comments and I'll tag them. But TLDR, someone else noticed that there is a tiny bit of gold in this meat. Looks like pure gold. This is the shaman's meat, bodies left over from the jars, and they contain gold. Now, whether this means that the shamans inherently have gold in them, or even more likely, gold is a result of whatever process occurs after they've been put in the jars, which makes sense since the grandmother can produce life in a crucible-like form, and we do know that gold has healing or life-giving properties, as we've seen from most of the Golden Order incantations, which are capable of healing, and from the minor Erdtree too, which Marika creates in the Shaman Village, which reads, secret incantation of Queen Marika, only the kindness of gold without order, creates a small illusory Erdtree that continuously restores the HP of nearby allies. Only the kindness of gold, it says. Based on all of this, it's easy to link gold to healing and to life, and maybe consequently even to power in a way. Whoever can heal and create life could theoretically control the world. Marika probably grasped this concept too. And now, onto the how. Well, once again, you should check out my other video about the ancestral spirits, but let's dive into this. We know that the tablets found in Marika's bedchamber are the same as those found in the specimen storehouse. I speculated earlier that the Hornsent were studying the process of life and death through the crucible. Given that these tablets are in Marika's bedchamber, it's clear that she knew about it too. Now, in the basement of the specimen storehouse, we find more shamans. A lot of shamans, or what remains of them, and also a lot of jars. What's sad, well, in a horrifying way, is that this environment doesn't look as grim and cold as Bonnie Village. It doesn't look like the shamans were killed here. It looks more like the shamans were being studied here. They're laid out on beds, almost like a hospital ward. Whoever was doing this, well, they weren't butchering them. It's more like a place of research, and the specimen storehouse actually looks more like a research facility than a slaughterhouse. So I think the shamans here were being studied, and I think Marika was the one doing the research. To back this up, The fact that the Shadow Keep has a secret entrance to the Shaman Village behind the statue of Marika makes me think that it was used to gain access to the shamans. Marika also has those tablets in her bedchamber, like we said, which might point to the research on the shamans or even on the gold itself. This would make sense, as we see that the tablets have been taken away with her after she sealed the Land of Shadow, probably documenting the gold, its property, and its uses. So, to recap, Marika studied the shamans and learned about the gold, likely figuring out how to use it for her own benefit. And let's face it, if the Hornsent wanted to turn her into a god, she probably still felt like a slave to their ambitions. And on a side note, considering Mesmer is her son and currently in the Shadow Keep, it's possible he was there and might have known of all of Marika's plans. Probably he helped, but this is just speculations. And so Marika understands the power of gold and decides to create a purer and more intense form of it. She gathers all the shamans, all the ones that are left, places them into the gigantic jar in Belurat Gaol, and concocts her own super concentrated shaman mixture. To what end, you ask? Well, what if Marika kills this new gold-filled shaman, and that's what we might see in the trailer, and she takes the gold from her, or it. She creates the original source of gold from all the shamans she gathered. Remember, the shamans, after being processed in jars, were able to host or produce gold. And let's give Marika some credit here. Maybe this wasn't all just for power. Maybe she did it for a greater good, a huge sacrifice to end all the barbaric practices of the Land of Shadow, to stop the Hornsent exploitation of the shamans, and to genuinely create a new order. One based on gold. Gold meaning healing and life. She takes the Elden Ring and she adds this gold to it, making her new order infused with the healing power of her kind of gold. After all, the Golden Braid description says, what was her prayer, her wish, her confession? There is no one left to answer, and Marika never returned home again. The prayer and wish could have been to stop everything, and the confession, maybe the mass murder of her own kin. I always found it interesting that the word confession is used here. Why mention a confession unless she did something truly wrong? And let's not forget that the minor Erdtree she cast in the village says, Marika baited the village overwhelming gold, knowing full well that there was no one to heal. The fact that it says she knew full well means she is responsible for whatever happened, or she knew really well what happened. She knew that what became of them. She is the reason for all the missing shamans in the village, and the fact that she never returned, she knew they were gone forever. This was the end of her kind, and it was a final act to end all suffering, an end she delivered herself. To back this up a bit further, think about it. If your entire family was destroyed, you'd probably make a memorial to them, right? It's human nature to commemorate the dead, especially if they perished in a horrible way. Look at war memorials. Across Europe, or at least the countries I lived in, every small town has a monument with the names of the fallen. On a more personal level, we have graveyards and tombstones. We honor the dead to keep their memory alive. But Marika? No. She gives a final confession, and then she seals the entire Land of Shadow away to be forgotten. That's odd to say the least. But anyway, moving on. When it's time for Marika's Ascension, she plays along with the Hornsent, heading to the Gate of Divinity, and when the moment arrives, she does ascend, but on her own terms. After the Hornsent sacrifice themselves to get the portal to work, she kills the super shaman and takes the gold from her. I mean, even if you don't believe the idea of her creating a mega shaman, that's fine, but the facts remain. The shamans are all gone, including the grandmother. Marika had a confession to make, and she knew full well that the shamans had disappeared. This suggests she is responsible for it, and more importantly, whoever that thing in the trailer is, it had a lot of gold in it. So the real question is, who's capable of producing so much gold? It's also crucial to note that how she got the Elden Ring, I have no clue, but the ring itself is simply order. The gold is added separately. We have proof of this because it's called the Golden Order, and we see this concept reinforced by the minor Erdtree, which says it's just the kindness of gold, no order. On a related note, think about how Mikla is called Mikla the Kind, and here we have the phrase the kindness of gold. I wonder if this is the pure unalloyed gold Miquella talks about in the game, and if his title comes from this concept of kindness. There's also a very interesting parallel between Miquella and the grandmother with the tree. Miquella is the offspring of Radagon and Marika, but it seems like he took the shaman side with the gold, while Malenia took after her father. Miquella is also seen embedded in the tree, his Erdtree, which resembles a little the grandmother story, how she might have given herself to the tree to produce life, but we know Miquella didn't succeed and his Erdtree rotted. Anyway, another very interesting point, most people thought the affair spoken in the trailer was a romantic affair.
An affair from which gold arose.
Well, that's kind of right, but there's more to it. The word affair, in a romantic sense, is spelled with an E at the end. However, if you look at the official FromSoft trailer with subtitles, they use the word affair without the E. This changes things. Affair without the E has multiple meanings. Yes, it can refer to a romantic affair between married people, but it can also mean a matter that is a particular person's concern or responsibility, or an event or sequence of events of a specific kind, or even matters of public interest or importance. So, when we hear the affair from which gold arose, it might not just be talking about a romantic affair. It could mean a sequence of events or manipulation that Marika carried out, which ultimately resulted in her getting hold of the gold. Maybe the seduction wasn't romantic at all. It could be the seduction of power, the seduction of gold, the seduction of her vision to bring about a new age of healing and prosperity for everyone. The betrayal, well, we have already known that part, but it makes me wonder, what if the betrayal wasn't just against the Hornsent? What if it was actually a betrayal of her own family, the Shamans? And so, let's quickly recap everything we've dug up so far. The Shamans, who were the key ingredient of the Hornsent twisted jar ritual, may have been crafted by a mysterious grandmother figure we find embedded in a tree. Marika, herself a shaman, could have studied this entire process and realized that the power of gold, the key to life and healing, was locked within her kin. She might have used the shamans to create a super shaman, filling the massive jar in Belurat Gaol, and when the time came, she took the gold for herself. Whether this was for sheer power or for a new order, she merged the gold with the Elden Ring, creating the Golden Order. But it was a sacrifice, an end to her kind, and while we can speculate on her motive, it's clear that the shamans were spirited away, their fate forever sealed behind the gate Marika herself created. And if you found this theory intriguing and would like to hear more from me and my weird theories about the lands between, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.